welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari, and in today's video we are going to be playing my mini TBR game. I made this Dungeons and Dragons inspired mini TBR game where you start at an inn, ooh, that's hard to say, and as you're going through the board, you go through different cities in Faerun. You have different fight encounters, boss encounters, and then you take a little break at a campfire. At the time of recording this, I have already played the game. I have already read all of the books. I am just going to insert clips of the roles here and then talk about each one of the books that I read.
Are you helping? You look like you're helping. So we haven't done a mini TBR in a little while, and with Captain's obvious help, let's do one this month. If you are new here, basically what we do is I roll a d6, travel throughout the board. This is like an adventure for a Dungeons and Dragons party. We got my little d20 and my d6. We go 3 spaces. Oh, this is 1, 2, 3, and we get a campfire to start out with.
First book I read was The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. Now, this landed on a campfire square, and a campfire prompt is just to take my monthly Dungeons and Books TBR, put all of the books that I need to read for that into a spinner wheel, and then just land on one of the books. Most of the spaces are campfire spaces. It is just a good way for me to get through my TBR for the month. Obviously, as I just said, The Sunlit Man was the first one. This is the 4th of Brandon Sanderson's Secret Project books. Fourth and... I was going to say the last, but the last of the first secret projects. This book follows a dude named Nomad, and I would say out of all of the secret projects, this is the one that you can't really read as a standalone. You need so much context from the Cosmere, which is Brandon Sanderson's made-up universe, to like understand what's going on in here. The character Nomad in here is a character for the Stormlight Archives, so it's definitely useful that you read at least the first 4 books of the Stormlight Archive before you go into here. I also think to understand Investure as how he's doing it in this book that you need to read Warbreaker. What I can't tell you is this guy Nomad is running from some guys who are trying to kill him, and he like teleports kind of to different planets while he's running. He ends up landing on this planet which has, as expected from Brandon Sanderson, a very cool magic system. The planet is very small, and the people who live on there have to constantly keep moving because if you're in the sunlight, you're just destroyed. Like, it gets so hot that nothing and no one can survive. And right behind the sun is a never-ending storm that like super cools the planet, so people can like survive on it after or in the dark. Not my favorite. I would say this is like 3rd place as far as how much I enjoyed the secret projects. Tress was my favorite, then Yumi and the Night Painter, then this one. I didn't like Frugal was like Handbook. That's just not my thing, and it was never going to be my thing. But yeah, first book down.
Time for the next roll. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Second roll, I landed on another campfire as expected, and this time I got The Angel of Indian Lake by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the 3rd book in the Lake Witch trilogy, and the series follows a girl named Jade, who in the first book is like 17 years old, and she, as a trauma response, is obsessed, like super obsessed with slashers and thinks she's living in one. We follow her as kind of the girl who cried wolf, where no one believes her because everybody knows that she's the weird girl who's obsessed with slashers. And this kind of happens pretty much in every one of these books, where there's a human killer and a supernatural killer. But the town is going to be facing a very, very high murder rate per capita. Now, the first book with Jade's like general weirdness and her obsession with slashers, I really like Jade. I found her amusing, and I understand that it's a trauma response and I shouldn't necessarily find people's trauma responses amusing, but she is also a fictional character. By the third book, Jade's trauma is so compounded and awful that she is no longer fun or amusing. She is a very sad, depressing, drug addicted woman. And yeah, her life has been tough. Like, understandably, her life has been really fucking awful. The third book kind of goes the way of how many slasher franchises do, where it's like bananas. There's so many different things killing different people and just bodies piling up. There's like scenes in this book where there's like dozens of people dying and multiple things killing them, and it's confusing, and I understand that it very, very much sticks to the idea of what happens in the slasher genre, but that doesn't necessarily mean I had to enjoy it. So I didn't like this. The third book wasn't for me. I don't think that means it won't be for everybody, but I did not enjoy it.
Time for the next roll. And it's a 2. Wait, where am I going? 1, 2.
Next up, I landed on the beholder space, and if you're not aware of what a beholder is, it's like this round creature with a bunch of eyeballs. So the prompt for this space is a popular book, or a book with all eyes on it. And for that, I read a new release called A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle Jensen. Now, this is romantasy, fantasy romance, set within like the Norse mythology, and it follows a woman named Freya. I keep wanting to call her Feyre, but that's a Court of Thorns and Roses. It's Freya. And she is what they consider in this magic system a child of a god. Like, she has human parents, but she was given a drop of God's blood into her heart as she was born and blessed with like magical powers based off of her godly parent. She specifically is a part of a prophecy where a shield maiden, which is what she is a shield maiden, will unite the lands under whomever controls her. So basically, she's a woman, she's treated like property, and the man that controls her will become king of everybody. And obviously all of these like city leaders don't want a king, so they're either trying to control her or kill her throughout the entire book. She is put with this dude named Bjorn, who is the son of the man who initially discovers her, and is like the man who's like, I'm gonna become king, I'm gonna control you, I know all about these prophecies, blah 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 blah. This is good for the most part. I really like the banter between the male main character and the female main character, and I think the pacing of this is very good. It's not too slow, but it's also not too fast. What I don't like is the whole ownership thing, right? It's fantasy. I don't need women to be treated badly in my fantasy. Like, I enjoy it more when women aren't items and things to be owned. Even if it's based off of something like real, like none of this is real. You can make women their own people and still have a plot to your book. Also, like the third act breakup thing that is like really big in, I would say, contemporary more than fantasy romance, but it does happen in fantasy romance sometimes. It happens here. Didn't really like that plot line. Kinda saw it coming. doesn't mean I have to like it. So I ended up giving this a 4 because for the most part I really enjoyed the story and the banter, but there was just a couple of things that kept it from being a 5. It's time to roll for the next book, and we basically want anything but a 2. A 1. Okay. Back to the spinner wheel. Next roll I hit another campfire and got Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. Now this is the book that the HBO show was based off of, and I'm gonna be honest with you, just watch the television show because this was one of the most boring things I have ever read in my entire life. This takes place in 1954, basically follows this like black family who travels around the United States mostly, and they run a travel agency, or at least the uncle owns a travel agency. They find different safe places where African American people can like stop for a bathroom, food, sleep, gas, and then they also mention cities that are like sundown towns where you're going to be killed if you were caught there after dark and you are a person of color. And a couple of characters in here get kind of mixed up with this group of white men who are kind of like the KKK, but more they're worshipping the old gods. I want to say Cthulhu, but it's not Cthulhu. It's Lovecraftian horror. So this is kind of like sacrifices to raise the old gods and kind of magic and warlocks and shit like that. Sounds interesting. Boring as hell, at least in this format. Also, Matt Ruff is a white man. This is a really weird story to be told by a white man, and occasionally that like comes through. There's a female character in here who through some like magic potion can turn herself into a redheaded white woman, and like the descriptions of her like literally shrinking in size, and then when the potion wears off she like rips through her clothes because as a black woman she is so much larger than this white woman. Yeah, boring. If you really want black horror, read like Victor LaValle or P.J. Shelley Clark. Like there are options out there that are not a white man writing about Jim Crow. Okay, time to roll again. We're right here. I want anything but a 1 because a 1 is going to make us go all the way back to the beginning, and a 6 will give us our last book. So anything but a 1. Okay, what it is. Okay, this is my Jar of Doom. It's a every book on my physical TBR that I acquired in 2023 or earlier. This is going to be The Gift of Fear. Next up, I landed on a Dragon Space, and Dragon Space suck because not only do I have to pull out of my Jar of Doom right here, which is just a piece of paper with every book on my physical TBR shelf on it, I also have to go back to the beginning and start over again. So, we got The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. Now, this is nonfiction. I DNF'd this. Mainly because the first story in here is about a woman who is going into her apartment and she's carrying groceries and the bag rips and just cat food, cans of cat food just fly everywhere. And this guy like, oh, let me help you carry this in. And she's like, oh, this guy seems a little bit sketchy. I don't want to be rude and tell him to like fuck off. She doesn't even let him. He like forces his way into her apartment and of course assaults her at gunpoint. So the moral that Mr. De Becker here says that we need to get from this story is that women should trust their intuition, and if they think a man is sketchy, to not let them in their house. And let me tell you, I don't need a man to tell me that. I kept reading after that, thinking, like, gaslighting myself, being like, that maybe that's not what he meant. Maybe this is gonna get better. One story, I shouldn't DNF this. Let me give it another chance. And then he goes on to like talk about like major tragedies of our generation, and he said something about the Murrah bombing in Oklahoma City in 1995, and I distinctly remember that event. I was young. It was like 5th grade, and I lived in Oklahoma. My mom worked a few blocks away from the Murrah building. Like, that was a very big deal in my life, but it definitely wasn't the defining tragedy of my generation. So I was a little bit confused because, well, yes, I do remember that. I don't think everybody remembers that. Especially people who weren't born in 95. So I then flipped to the front of the book, to the copyright page, and realized this was published in 1997. And if I don't need a man to tell me to trust my intuition, then I definitely don't need a man in 1997 to tell me that. So I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna get anything useful out of this book, so let's go ahead and DNF it and move on.
All right, back at the beginning, let's get some big numbers and some short books. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh. Yeah, that's not what I wanted. I guess we're going back to the Jar of Doom and back to the beginning here. Alright. What book is next? This one looks nice. And this is Haunted West Virginia. Let's see if I can... Yeah, this is a very short book, so it should be just fine, even though I'm not super excited. We started over again.
Next up, I rolled again and landed on another freaking dragon. Now, some of you might have noticed at this point that I shouldn't have landed on the dragon here. I started on the first space instead of off the board like I'm supposed to, and I should have landed on the city of Baldur's Gate. I didn't realize this until after I'd already read the book, so too little too late. I pulled another slip out of my TBR jar and got a very short book, which is Haunted West Virginia. Now, this is just a collection of short stories about hauntings or supernatural activity in West Virginia. It is, if you took like a haunted tour guide, like these are the kind of stories you're going to be told. There's nothing super exciting about them. Some of them are a little creepy. The best part of this book is the pictures, and I have to share with you my favorite, which is Mothman. Please tell me that is not the most amazing thing you've ever seen in your life. All of the pictures are equally as great. So yeah, I don't really have a rating for this. I got this for pennies at a library sale. That's the only reason it's on my bookshelf.
Alright, I'm starting over again, and I realized I messed up last time, and I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, when I'm not supposed to start here. I'm supposed to start off of the thing. So I've already read that book. There's no going back. But let's re-roll again and try to do it right. So I don't want a 6 is what I don't want. Do you ever feel attacked? Alright, I'll get the jar again. Alright, I've read this earlier in this video. Okay. Gargoyle.
As you just saw, this is where I realized that, oh shit, I shouldn't have rolled, or I shouldn't have started over there. Oh well, we've already started over, we've read that book, we're back in the beginning, and then I roll the actual number I needed to get that dragon, which was a 6. And then we're starting over again. This time I pulled Gargoyle by Andrew Davison, which was another book that I got at that same library sale. Like, I have quite a few books on that shelf. Like, you could see how many pieces of paper in there, and for some reason I'm only pulling books that I got at that library sale. So this, again, something that cost pennies. Apparently it's one of my mom's favorite books, and that's why I picked it up, because I remember seeing it at my mom's house. I said I remember seeing it at my mom's house when I was in high school, but that's not true, because this didn't release till 2008 and I graduated high school in 2002. General fiction, historical fiction, a little bit of magical realism. I'm just calling it general fiction because that's mostly what it is. And our main character, the Gargoyle, he is a porn star, and he is driving while under the influence, has an accident, the gas tank catches on fire and the car goes up in flames. He is burnt through most of his body, and while he is recovering in the burn ward, he meets this woman who says that they are like destined, fated lovers, and that she has been alive since the 14th century, waiting to find him again so she could like give him her last heart, because she has a lot of hearts. It doesn't really make sense. He thinks that she is schizophrenic and bipolar, but she has and knows a lot of things that she really shouldn't, unless she was actually born in the 14th century. Overall, I think the story is kind of interesting. There's a lot of historical references in there if you like historical fantasy. There's no like, there's romance, but there's no like sexual romance, because his man parts were completely burned off in the fire, which they do talk about a lot. So if you're not comfortable with that, maybe this doesn't work for you. But yeah, I thought it was okay. Like, I didn't hate it, I didn't love it. It was fine.
All right, once again, 5. And we're gonna count right this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go with Baldur's Gate.
Now, if at any point you were wondering why last week I said that I didn't finish the video in time and I had to have a filler video last week, I hope this answers that question. So at this point, I am trying to get through these books as fast as possible, and I'm going to put the shortest books I could possibly find on my TBR. As you saw for this one, I landed on the Baldur's Gate space, which is a book with diversity in it. And for this one, I ended up reading a book of poetry by a Black queer woman. We have the intersectionality of Black and queer, which is 2 different types of diversity that I could potentially read for this prompt. This poetry collection was good but not great, where she either used her phone's like autocomplete feature to write poems, which I thought was a very cool idea, or she took like messages out of a group chat to create a poem out of. I very much enjoyed both of those poems, or I very much enjoyed the poems written like in those formats, but overall the book of poetry itself was good, like no complaints. There was nothing bad about it, it just wasn't like standout, like hugely favorite book of poetry for me.
We don't want a 1 or a 6. Both of those are bad numbers. 5 works. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's time to spin the wheel again.
Next up, I hit another campfire. I don't have many books left, but I fortunately got the easiest book out of what was left to read, and that is Dig by A.S. King. Now this is YA. It looks thick, but it's YA, and like the font is very big, so it didn't take me but a few hours to read. One thing I have to say is I felt like the flap here spoiled like the plot of the book. Like, it says something in here that we don't find out until almost the very end of the book, so I'm not sure what that was about, but I would say this one is again kind of magical realism, where it follows a bunch of different people, mostly teenagers, who are living in poverty or with like bad parents. One teenager, his parent is dying of cancer, and he has to live with his grandparents, who are kind of awful people. We also follow that kid's grandparents in here, and these are like stereotypical boomer parents. They are multimillionaires, but pretty much none of their kids speak to them anymore just because of how awful they treated their children. And they have this like belief that their children need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and refuse to really help or support their children in any way, and then wonder why their children want nothing to do with them. So we like follow all these people through like very basic everyday things, but the way the story is told is so like weird and whimsical, it almost seems magical. And I really enjoyed like the boringness of a story. It's called Dig because the grandparents or the grandfather came from a family of potato farmers. Like, he wasn't a potato farmer, but he came from a family of potato farmers, and it's just such like a simple idea of like the everyday lives of different people in different generations, but told so weirdly that it's interesting. There's also a ghost. So that just like mixes everything up, and that's where like the magical realism bit comes in, is there's like a literal ghost girl in here. So overall, I really enjoyed this. I think it would be even better for a teenager than it was for me. If you're interested in it, I think you should pick it up. And I think if you have teenagers, that this would be a great thing to give to those teenagers. Okay, so a 1 would suck. A 2 would pretty much suck because it's like a 400 plus page book. But anything other than that, I think I'm good with. Yeah, not shocking. Okay, 400 plus page book. It's not the worst rule that I could have gotten, but it's pretty close. We landed on Calumport, and Calumport's prompt is a book over 400 pages. And I don't have time for a book over 400 pages. So I just grabbed the one book left on this month's TBR that happened to be over 400 pages, and that was The Ones We Burn by Rebecca Mix. I DNF'd this. And honestly, a 400 page book that I DNF'd at this point was really the best case scenario, because I need to get through this board. I don't have time for any of this. But I'm also kind of sad that I DNF'd this. Now, based on the title of this book, I should have known this was about witches. Like, The Ones We Burned. Like, how did I not realize this is about witches? I think it's because of the axe on the cover, like, just threw me off. I don't like stories about witches, and I read some of this. I switched to the audiobook to see if that would help any, and I was not interested, and I did not get very far in. I got like 10% in or something like that before I was just like, why am I reading this? I don't like stories about witches. I don't care about these people. Let's just DNF this and I'm good. Is there anything even remotely wrong with that book? No, probably not. I just personally do not like stories with witches. All right, next roll. Another 2.
We've got Luskin.
Alright, I don't know how long it's been happening, but I think there's a ghost over here, or just my series jar. It really wants to think that's a face. So if I've been blurry anytime, I'm sorry. I moved it. We landed on Luskin. And Luskin is a city that is just a shell of its former self. So for this, I need to read either a book that's been on my TBR for a long time or a used book. It's also Monday. I'm not to the end of the board yet. I have to work all day. And this has to go up on Tuesday. So I need to edit it Monday night. So as fast as humanly possible, getting through this next book and then anything else I get after here, because there's at least one more book coming. Something super fast to read. What do I have that's used that will read very quickly? I grabbed Darkness by Christopher Croviton. Again, this is one of the books that I got at that library sale. I don't have a whole lot of used books left on my TBR shelf, so I didn't have a lot of choices, but this was definitely the shortest of the choices that I had. This is a middle grade horror story. It basically follows this kid on an island. This island like randomly goes like pitch black, where like phone lights don't show up, candles lit don't show up, and the people on this island are like, what the F is going on? Because it'll go pitch black for like a couple hours and then the light will come back and no one really knows what's going on. And these very young kids are of course going to solve this mystery. Now, realistic? No. I'm not a huge fan of middle grade because oftentimes you have like incompetent adults and this is no different. And obviously the horror also makes it super not realistic, but I think there's something in here for a preteen that wants to get into horror. It's not too spooky, but it's actually pretty kind of scary. And there's some messaging around like racism and building friendships, your parents going through a divorce, things like that that I think would resonate with somebody that age. But this is definitely written for a preteen and not middle grade for adults, if that makes sense.
Hopefully the last roll, unless I roll a 1. Nope. We are off the board. We really need like a graphic novel out of here. I don't have time for this. That one just didn't want to give up. This is very hard to do with only one hand. Legends of the First Empire. I'm gonna put this one back. There's absolutely no way I have time to read that. The Darker Woods series? I don't know what this is.
As soon as we're off the board, we have a final spinner wheel. And the spinner wheel will tell me how to pick another book. I got the series jar. And as you saw, when I pulled out the series jar, the first series that I pulled out there was absolutely no way I was going to finish in time. So I knew that this video would not go up. So I'm like, you know what? Screw it. My game, my rules. I've already read 11 books for this. Let me just grab something else really quick. And I pulled out another series, which was the Darker Woods series by Alexi Blake or May Sage. Now, this is one of the most confusing things I've ever seen, where the author has 2 names, 2 pen names, and I believe at some point she rebranded. So I feel like this was originally a duology that she expanded, but then also rebranded, and she changed her pen name or started using her real name. I'm not sure. You have this book, which is Shadow Cursed by May Sage, and then you have this book that is Shadow Cursed by Alexi Blake, and they're wildly different looking, but this is the exact same book. When she made it into the Darker Woods series, it's like a series of duologies set in the same universe. So I've finished the first duology now. I'm just going to tell you the plot of the first book because, like I said, it is a duology. This is basically a young woman who is the granddaughter of the Queen of the Unseelie Fae, and she was told by her grandmother that you were super powerful, but no one can know you're powerful. So you have to hide your magic. You have to pretend like you're weak, and that's basically what she does. Is she pretends like she has no power, at risk of her family being killed by her evil queenly grandmother. But then shit goes down, as it always does. It's also fantasy romance, so you have like the banter and stuff like that. Now, book one, they don't have any sort of sex in book one, but book two there is a lot of sex. So if you're into like the smutty fantasy romance or smutty romantasy, just know it's a slow burn and rivals to lovers, so you're not going to get any smut in book one, but you get plenty of smut in book two. The thing with this series is these books are very short. They're like right at 300 pages, and Alexi Blake, or May Sage, or whatever her name is, covers a whole hell of a lot of like plot in a very short amount of time. So these books read so fast. It took me like 2 hours to read Shadow Cursed, which is why it was perfect for this. And it just go, 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 go. Just everything gets resolved super fast. So if you don't like super fast paced books, this may not be for you, but if you just kind of want like a quick love story where it covers a lot but it just happens really fast, then hey. I really liked the first book, Wicked Court. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't like this one as much. There's no real reason. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the first one. So, but I'm looking forward to eventually reading the rest of the series. I don't feel the need to DNF it because these books are so short. The end of the game. I made it. Barely. Thank you for being here with me today and for watching me play this little mini TBR game. Next week, I'm going to do a vlog reading the books for the Peace Talk weekends of Realmathon. So if you're interested in that, I will see you next week. The week after that will be my April TBR, so if you're more interested in TBRs, then I'll see you in 2 weeks. Either way, I will see you soon. Bye!